Help support the show by joining the Patreon or becoming a YouTube member. Also, hit that like button and subscribe if you want more Browns-focused content. But we're on with JP ACOSTA. In the first part of this video, we talked about the Cleveland Browns trying to get ahead of some of these trends in the NFL as far as being a more physical team. In this video, me and JP are going to talk about the much vaulted, much rumored about, mysterious 2026 quarterback class. It is really early in the process, and I think it's important that we say this here. We are recording this video May 6th in 2025. Nothing we are saying here is definitive, okay? Or nor meant to be taken definitive. But if you are looking for some names to look out for and some guys who might spark some interest as far as that 2026 draft in a year at the quarterback position, well, these are some names to get you started throughout this. Some you might know, some you might not be familiar with, but definitely just a jumping off point for a larger conversation to be had about a year from now at the quarterback position.
Yeah, this 2026 class, I said when I first released my initial 2026 big board that it has promise. That doesn't mean that it's better than the 2025 class, but I see a lot of potential in them. I think there's the athletic upside of most of the top guys is massive. I think it's a lot bigger than guys at the top of last year's class, at the top of 2025's class. However, with those athletic upsides, there comes a lot of question marks up and down the board. I think there are a lot of guys I'm really intrigued by that I didn't put on my top 32. So I'm curious to see what happens, but if I had to describe this 2026 class, it would be promising. That's the word that I would use to describe them.
Speaking of promising, let's go through the guys I think people are pretty familiar with, right, in this class. There's the Garrett Nussmeyers, the Cade Klubnik, Drew Aller, and Lenore Sellers is a name I don't think a lot of people are familiar with, but I think they will get pretty familiar with Lenore as he plays in the SEC. Like, if he has a good year, you're going to know about it. And he's already played before. Is there anybody else that I'm missing to that list of guys that have kind of an established history? Like, I know there's Carson Beck, but he's in a different category of what we're talking about here.
I think you kind of nailed the few guys on the head. I think Arch Manning is one of those. I wouldn't say established name, but he's quite possibly the biggest name in this 2026 QB crop, but that's even if he declares for 2026.
Which seems to be very up in the air, given, like, for me, I just look back at that Manning family history. I'm like, they did not really have a emphasis on coming out early. And I think, weren't they one of the groups that were credited with convincing Andrew Luck to leave, or not leave early in Stanford?
I don't know. I think that might have been Elway.
It might have been Elway.
I'm not sure.
Yeah, well, there's a lot behind that, right? Like, because if Manning has one good season in college with that last name, he's probably going to be the number one overall pick.
Yeah, but I mean, at this point, we are looking at a guy who has 95 passing attempts in his entire career.
Yes.
He's looked good at certain points. I mean, Mississippi State had some intriguing stuff happen. I think he made some nice throws against Louisiana Monroe, but in big moments against teams where the talent was equal, he looked overwhelmed, which is fine because he wasn't a starter. He's not a starting quarterback yet. So I think we need to pump the brakes a little bit on Arch Manning right now and saying, like, number one overall pick, generational quarterback, which he could be. But we need to see it first. We need to have it actually, like, I wouldn't put him at QB1 over any of the guys that we listed because those guys have larger bodies of work right now.
Also, I do worry about Andrew. I mean, he's been built up to be this whole thing, Arch Manning. And it's like, there's a question of, like, if anybody could ever live up to as much as he's been pumped up to be at this point. Which I think is a real thing you have to consider with Arch, right? Like, he's expected to be the heir apparent to the Manning throne, which is what everybody's been a Hall of Fame quarterback, won multiple championships in that throne. It's just that's a lot to put on somebody who really hasn't played much. And it's like the second he gives anybody any hope that he could be that, I wonder if that's also something that becomes a burden for him later on in his career. Now, there's other guys in this class. What Kate Klubnik was one of the top recruits in this class, right? I mean,
I think he was the number one recruit.
Yeah, Nico Imaliva was another one that's a top recruit of his year. So you got guys like that. What categories would you put guys in where there's quarterbacks who are looking interesting for this draft class who had more humble beginnings as prospects? Then there are the quarterbacks that we all have heard about because of their name or recruiting process. What quarterbacks would you place in each pile if we were to categorize them like that?
So if I had to categorize it by guys who kind of came up a little bit, I would honestly put Drew Aller in the come up story kind of quarterback bracket. He was not a highly ranked recruit, not highly sought after until one off season, one summer going into his senior year, where everything kind of clicked, everything took off for him. I think Garrett Nussmeier, kind of the same. It's a little different for him because his dad is currently the offensive coordinator of the New Orleans Saints, so he has that pedigree, but he wasn't exactly a super ballyhooed recruit. And then I think you get into guys that like Fernando Mendoza, who is my QB1 going into 2026. Not a super highly sought after guy, but continued to develop, put in the work in college, and now we're at the point where he's at now. Whereas I think with Kate Klubnik came in number one overall recruit or number one top recruit. Lots of ups and downs in his career, but is really putting it together with an offense that has kind of grown around him as he's grown. I think Iamaleava has a lot of work to get through. I don't think I just really I want to believe. I don't know if it's going to work for him in 2026. I'll say maybe come back in 2027. Another guy that's kind of like that is kind of on my radar is Aiden Childs, who's at Michigan State. Incredibly talented, super fast, explosive arm. Would love to see a little bit more consistency from him in 2026, but he's a guy that I have on my radar as sort of a quarterback who can make a big jump going into the season. Lenore Sellers was a highly rated recruit who is a monster athlete, just one of the best athletes at the QB position in college football. And then I think a guy who kind of came up a little bit is Eli Holstein at Pitt. He's got a little bit of recklessness to him. He plays a little bit like the movie Jackass, but he's got a lot of intriguing traits. Kind of fell apart at the end of the season, but again, there's a lot of promise in this QB class.
Yeah, definitely. All right, so Fernando Mendoza, I feel like that's a new name for a lot of people, even who have been paying attention to the football world. I know when I first saw a couple of the people who I know that really get into the draft start tweeting about Indiana quarterback Fernando Mendoza, I was like, I had to do a double take. Like, who is that? Like, where did he play before Indiana? Because he clearly did not play there last year. It was Curtis Wark as the quarterback, but he's transferring to Indiana. Fernando Mendoza, it's a name that I've been hearing a lot. You even have him as your QB1, which surprised me. Tell us about this guy, right? This Fernando Mendoza, what he brings to the table and why it is that so many people feel so strongly after watching his tape at Cal that he is up there with somebody, as talented as Lenore Sellers that we've all gotten to see on television, run away from Clemson.
I think with Fernando Mendoza, the thing that stands out to me is just the processing speed, along with the athleticism. You see the easy velocity. I think he does his best work, honestly, on third down, where he's able to slide protections. He's able to do some work with his mind before letting just lasers go on third down. I think he's athletic enough. I'm not going to say like you want to make him a +1 in your run game, but he's a tough kid, wants to throw the ball out beyond the numbers, outside the sticks. I think that he's got a lot of that same aggression that you kind of saw from Drake May, who I was very high on entering his draft year. So I kind of see some similarities to him in that. And again, the precision at which he throws the ball on third down really stands out. I'm a huge, huge fan of his game.
Absolutely. What do you think you need to see of him to, well, one, let's live in a world where like everything goes right for him. What does that look like at Indiana? And if it does, like if he does have like a really strong season there, what kind of prospect does he then become? Like you mentioned Drake May. Is this going to be a no-brainer top 3 pick situation? Is it going to be a no-brainer number 1 overall guy? How deep, far can it go with him?
I think he has potential to be a no-brainer top 3 guy if everything breaks right at Indiana. I think I'd like to see him be a little bit more creative as a passer going into this season, especially at Indiana where he might not have all the superstar talent that a lot of guys will have at like Texas or like Clemson. But I think getting him on the bigger stage against more talented teams going into 2025 is going to be huge for him. People will see the kind of talent that he is.
Yeah, and especially after we saw Indiana kind of fold against every big time opponent they played last year, it'd be something if we see this guy, rise above it. It definitely would paint a stark contrast in the mind of a lot of folks who watching college football. Now, Lenore Sellers, I mean, I think football nerds are well aware of Lenore Sellers, right? We love watching anybody who has any potential at the quarterback position. But for those who might not be as familiar, they're not watching any of the games that aren't, in immediate top 10 playoff contention on Saturdays. Explain Lenore Sellers' game and who he reminds you of as a prospect at this point of his draft process.
So everything that we wanted Anthony Richardson to be kind of feels like what Lenore Sellers is now, just super dominant athlete. The way that he avoids sacks and pressure is some of the funniest things that I've ever seen. He'll like there are a few reps against Texas A&M where he just throws Shamar Stewart off of his back. And again, Shamar Stewart, first round draft pick, one of the craziest athletes we've seen go to the combine. He's just throwing him off his back like it's nothing. He's outrunning guys. But to me, it's some of the stuff that he does, the little things where you're like, oh, this isn't just an athlete playing quarterback. This is a guy who has shown he wants to be a high level processor, like a baller. So I would love to see him improve a little bit in the short area accuracy. But if you're talking about a guy who's like 6'3, 242, can run extremely fast, strong arm, and again, the pocket maneuvering and the pocket management is something that I was really, really impressed by because you go in thinking, oh, it's an athlete at quarterback. He might not know how to manage a pocket outside just running around, but he wants to mitigate the space and find guys downfield. And that really stood out to me.
Yeah, I think that's the most impressive thing about him is that combined with, he's demonstrated some pretty good accuracy touching on some of these throws, especially downfield. And if he puts together a big time season, right? Let's say he wins like the Heisman Trophy in the SEC, South Carolina makes a little bit of a playoff run. A similar question what I asked about Mendoza is how far do you see it going with Lenoris, and like do you think he could become, a guy who is like what in terms of like prospect hype, I guess, where would you put him on the scale of like, hey, he could become this guy eventually?
I think for Lenoris, I think the hype will be a lot higher because he's at South Carolina and he does all the cool running stuff that I think
Mm-hmm.
a lot of guys will see. Mendoza plays at Indiana. I think he's going to be the hype will be a little bit died down because of all the bigger names at bigger schools at the quarterback position. But I think as we start to get the ball rolling on the 2025 college football season, more people will come around to Mendoza.
It would be kind of a replay of Jaden Daniels, Drake May, except for what both these guys are relatively the same age, right?
Yeah. Well, I think May might be. Let me check.
Because what Mendoza and Lenoris, though, they're both true juniors at this point or redshirt sophomores.
I think Lenoris is a redshirt sophomore. I think Mendoza is a junior.
Mm. So, man, about the same age where that would be the key difference between them and the Jaden Daniels, Drake May year. Again, we're talking best case scenario if they both have, the best seasons possible. that could be where it's at there. The Browns made a bet in this draft, which is we are gonna try to see what we can get away with this year at quarterback, obviously, but our primary resources are gonna be reserved for at least next year's draft. If you were a team or you were a GM of a team looking for a quarterback, how would you feel about that bet at this point in time, knowing that, hey, the 2025 class is over and done with? You have Dylan and Shador on your roster right now. And then you're looking at 2026 and you're saying, that's where I have the extra resources. That's where I'm betting on there being a no-brainer situation at the quarterback position that I can trade myself into at the worst. How do you feel about that bet if that's the one you made and you're in the situation the Browns are in?
I feel pretty fine. I feel pretty confident about that because they've set themselves up to, I mean, in 2025, they took a shot on the quarterback position. They took 2 shots on the quarterback position. If it works, great. You don't need to use 1 of your 2 first-round picks on the quarterback. If it doesn't, that's also okay. You're not tied to these guys. You spend a 3rd and a 5th on them. But they've set themselves up really well to give the guys that they drafted a solid shot at proving themselves to be the guy this year. But having those 2 first-round picks next year is going to set them up really well to go, all right, if these guys don't prove it to us, then we can either trade up for a guy or we're sitting pretty in the top 10 to go get one of those guys. So I think they've set themselves up well to evaluate who they have right now, but also keep in the back of their head, like this 2026 class has a lot of promise and could be better than the 2025 class.
Definitely. Well, JP, thank you for coming on here, giving us some knowledge about the 2026 class. Where can people find more of your work? And, as this class goes on, right, where can people keep up with your opinions about how these quarterbacks are playing and how everybody else in this class looks? It's not just the quarterback draft, right? Going to be a lot of other players in that class.
Of course, you can find my work at SB Nation. I am the lead NFL writer, football writer, honestly. I write about the NFL draft as well. You can find me on Blue Sky at ACOSTA32JP, and then on social media, on X or Twitter, call it Twitter. It's Twitter, at ACOSTA32_JP. You can find me there, see what I'm doing, see where I'm going.
All right. Yeah. See, look, if I'm born 19 anything, I'm calling it Twitter. That's my line. Like,
his mama named it Twitter. I'm gonna call it Twitter.
But thank you, JP, for joining us. Make sure you guys go check out his work. He does great stuff there. Y'all have a great day. Have a better night. Peace.